The Eternal Supremacy Council had ruled the galaxy for exactly 3,847 years, 4 months, and 12 days. Not that anyone was counting, except for the Council themselves, who kept meticulous records of their own magnificence. Their towering obsidian fortress orbited the galactic core, a monument to bureaucratic efficiency and casual genocide that had somehow convinced itself it was bringing civilization to the unwashed masses. The Council consisted of 3 primary species, each more insufferably superior than the last. The Vorthak, crystalline beings, whose bodies hummed with barely contained energy, considered themselves the galaxy's intellectual elite. They spoke in mathematical equations and measured intelligence by how many decimal places one could calculate pi. The Zephyrian Empire, insectoid warriors with exoskeletons that could deflect plasma rounds, served as the Council's enforcement arm. They communicated through violent clicking sounds that somehow managed to convey both military precision and barely restrained bloodlust. Finally, the Quelith Syndicate, shape-shifting merchants who could assume any form but invariably chose the most unsettling combination of features from various species, handled trade, espionage, and the delicate art of making other civilizations dependent on Council technology. For nearly 4 millennia, their system had worked flawlessly. The subjugation protocols, a masterpiece of social engineering, kept lesser species exactly where they belonged, grateful, subservient, and technologically stunted. The Council would identify promising civilizations, make contact under the guise of benevolent guidance, then systematically cripple their development through carefully managed trade agreements and technological dependencies. It was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its effectiveness. Then humanity showed up, and everything went sideways. The humans had been the Council's latest project, a young species that had barely crawled out of their gravity well when first contact occurred. They should have been easy to manage, primitive, fractured, obsessed with tribal conflicts over resources that more advanced civilizations considered worthless. The Council had confidently applied their standard protocols, established trade relationships, introduce controlled technological advancement, create dependency, then slowly strangle innovation. Except humans, it turned out, had the galactic equivalent of oppositional defiant disorder. Instead of gracefully accepting their place in the cosmic hierarchy, they asked questions, uncomfortable questions. They reverse-engineered everything they could get their hands on, improved upon it, then had the audacity to suggest better ways of doing things. When the Council politely suggested that certain research areas were beyond human understanding, humans responded by diving headfirst into those exact fields with the enthusiasm of toddlers discovering finger paint. The Vorthak found human scientific methodology crude but disturbingly effective. The Zephyrians were insulted by human military tactics that prioritized survival over honor. The Quelith were baffled by human merchants who actually read contracts before signing them and had the nerve to negotiate for better terms. In short, humans were becoming a problem. The final straw came in the form of Mira Chen, a 19-year-old human researcher stationed on Nexus 7, one of the Council's premier research facilities. Mira had been assigned to what the Council considered busy work, analyzing quantum harmonics in FTL drive cores. It was supposed to keep her occupied, while real scientists handled the important work. Instead, Mira discovered something that made every Council member's equivalent of blood run cold: human mathematics, when applied to quantum field manipulation, could theoretically increase FTL efficiency by 4,700%. The implications were staggering. Such technology would render the Council's trade monopolies worthless overnight. Worse, it would give humanity the means to travel anywhere in the galaxy faster than Council forces could respond. The careful balance of power that had maintained galactic stability for millennia would crumble in a matter of years. The Council's response was swift and predictable. They ordered the immediate termination of the research and arranged for an accident to befall the troublesome human scientist. Vexstar, a Quelith operative, whose current form resembled a cross between a Vorthak crystal formation and a Zephyrian carapace, received the assignment with professional detachment. Eliminating problematic researchers was standard procedure, The Council had been doing it for centuries. The method was elegantly simple: a power surge in the research lab's containment systems, followed by a catastrophic failure that would vaporize everything within a 50-meter radius. Tragic, unavoidable, and completely untraceable. What Vexstar hadn't anticipated was Mira's habit of working late shifts when the lab was officially closed, or her tendency to route experimental data through multiple backup systems, or her paranoid insistence on keeping detailed logs of every anomaly in the station's power grid. When Mira detected the first signs of sabotage, subtle alterations to the containment field generators that would cause a cascade failure, she had less than 6 minutes to act. Instead of running, she spent 4 of those minutes compiling everything she'd discovered about quantum harmonics, the sabotage attempt, and Vexstar's involvement. She encrypted the data package with human military-grade protocols and transmitted it directly to Earth via quantum entanglement communicator. Then she confronted Vexstar in the lab's main chamber. "You know," Mira said, her voice carrying across the humming machinery with remarkable calm, "I've always wondered what it would feel like to be considered such a threat that an entire galactic government decided I needed to die." Vexstar's form rippled with surprise. The human should have been fleeing in terror, not standing there with what appeared to be a smile on her face. "Your research threatened galactic stability," Vexstar replied, falling back on standard justifications. "The Council regrets the necessity, but, oh, spare me the corporate speak," Mira interrupted. "You're scared. You're all scared. And you know what the funny thing is? You should be." The containment fields began to fluctuate as Vexstar's sabotage reached critical parameters. Energy readings spiked into dangerous territory. "The funniest part," Mira continued, backing toward the emergency exit but making no real attempt to escape, "is that you think killing me will solve your problem. You have no idea what humanity is actually capable of when we're properly motivated." The plasma containment finally failed at 23:47 Galactic Standard Time. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. The Council's official report classified the incident as an unfortunate accident caused by human inexperience with advanced technology. They expected Earth's government to file a formal complaint, perhaps demand reparations, then quietly accept the loss and continue their steady integration into Council-controlled society. For 72 hours, Earth said nothing at all. The silence was more unsettling than any diplomatic protest would have been. Human communication networks, normally buzzing with constant chatter across hundreds of colonies, went completely dark. Trade ships stopped responding to hails. Research stations throughout human space suddenly found their personnel unavailable for contact. The Vorthak calculated a 97.3% probability that humanity was simply processing grief and would resume normal operations within the week. The Zephyrians assumed the humans were cowering in fear, which was the natural response of prey species when predators flexed their claws. The Quelith began preparing psychological manipulation programs designed to capitalize on human emotional trauma. All 3 species were about to learn that their understanding of human psychology had some significant gaps. On the 4th day, long-range sensors detected a massive energy signature approaching the galactic core. The Council's initial assumption was that Earth had finally decided to send a diplomatic vessel to discuss reparations for their lost researcher. They prepared their standard condolences and arranged for a ceremonial meeting that would officially acknowledge humanity's place in the galactic hierarchy. The signature resolved into a fleet of 300 ships unlike anything the Council had seen before. They were sleek, angular vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and their energy readings suggested power cores that shouldn't have been possible with known human technology. The lead ship broadcast a single message on all frequencies. "This is Admiral Yuki Tanaka of the Human Liberation Fleet. We are here to discuss the murder of Mira Chen. You have 24 hours to surrender the individuals responsible, or we will begin demonstration of what humans call the Erasure Protocol." The Council's response was predictable. They denied any involvement in what they insisted was an accident, demanded that the human fleet withdraw from Council space immediately, and began mobilizing their own forces for what they assumed would be a brief but educational conflict. The Vorthak deployed their crystal ships, massive geometric constructs that could manipulate gravitational fields with mathematical precision. The Zephyrians launched their war swarms, millions of fighter craft that moved in perfect coordination like angry metallic insects. The Quel'The activated their infiltration networks, preparing to destabilize human command structures from within. It was an impressive display of the military might that had kept the galaxy under Council control for millennia. The assembled fleet represented the combined technological advancement of three ancient civilizations at the height of their power. Admiral Tanaka's response was to transmit what humans called a tactical demonstration. The human ships didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, they projected coherent quantum fields that simply erased things. Not destroyed, not damaged, erased. The quantum signatures of targeted objects were disrupted at the subatomic level, causing them to cease existing in any meaningful sense. The Vorthak's proudest crystal ship, a monument to geometric perfection that had never been damaged in 2,000 years of warfare, simply wasn't there anymore. The Zephyrian war swarms found their quantum coherence disrupted, causing individual fighters to phase out of reality like bad holographic projections. The Quel'The infiltration network discovered that their shape-shifting abilities had some uncomfortable limitations when their quantum signatures were being actively rewritten. In 17 minutes, the Council lost 60% of their assembled fleet without the human ships taking a single casualty. The demonstration concluded with Admiral Tanaka's follow-up message: "We have decided that 24 hours was too generous. You now have 6 hours to produce the individuals responsible for Mira Chen's murder. Failure to comply will result in the implementation of comprehensive erasure protocols across all Council territories." The Council's emergency session devolved into the kind of screaming match that typically preceded the collapse of galactic governments. The Vorthak insisted that human technology was impossible and demanded detailed mathematical analysis of the quantum erasure effect. The Zephyrians wanted to launch a full-scale assault before the humans could bring more ships. The Quel'The suggested immediate negotiations while quietly preparing to abandon their allies and flee to distant star systems. Their debate was interrupted by the arrival of human boarding parties. The Council fortress, protected by energy shields that could withstand direct hits from stellar-class weapons, offered no resistance to humans who simply materialized inside the structure. The quantum transport technology was beyond anything the Council had encountered. Their sensors couldn't even detect the transport signatures until armed humans were already standing in the Council chamber. "Gentlemen," Admiral Tanaka said, her voice carrying the kind of casual authority that made seasoned warriors reconsider their life choices, "we need to have a conversation about cause and effect." The assembled Council members, representatives of species that had never shown deference to anyone in recorded history, found themselves very carefully not making any sudden movements. "You killed one of our people," Tanaka continued, settling into the Council's primary speaking platform with the ease of someone completely comfortable with hostile environments. "We've spent the last 72 hours deciding how to respond to that." The debate was quite spirited, actually. Some of our people wanted to glass your homeworlds and be done with it. Others suggested a more targeted approach, perhaps eliminating just your leadership and letting your civilizations figure out democracy on their own. She paused, studying the three species representatives with the detached interest of a scientist examining particularly unpleasant specimens. "We decided on erasure instead. Complete, comprehensive, irreversible erasure. Not of your people, we're not monsters, but of your power, your influence, your ability to hurt anyone ever again." The Vorthak representative, a crystalline construct named Zervac, whose mathematical perfection was currently disrupted by what humans would recognize as terror, managed to form words: "You cannot simply dissolve galactic government. The chaos would what?" Tanaka interrupted. "Cause suffering, destroy civilizations, eliminate entire species." "You mean it would do exactly what your council has been doing for 4,000 years, except faster and with less paperwork?" She gestured to the chamber around them, her expression suggesting the kind of disappointment usually reserved for particularly slow students. "You made the classic mistake of assuming that newer meant weaker. You saw humanity's recent arrival on the galactic stage and decided we were primitive. You looked at our fractured governments and assumed we were disorganized. You observed our tendency toward conflict and concluded we were self-destructive." Tanaka's smile was the sort that made predators reconsider their dietary choices. What you failed to understand is that humans are very good at learning from our enemies. We've been reverse engineering your technology since first contact. We've been studying your tactics, your psychology, your weaknesses. We've been preparing for this exact scenario since the day we realized what kind of people we were dealing with. The chamber fell silent except for the humming of advanced technology and the barely audible sound of 3 different species contemplating the end of their galactic dominance. The irony, Tanaka continued, is that we didn't want to rule the galaxy. We were perfectly happy to find our place in whatever system existed, but you couldn't leave well enough alone. You had to interfere, manipulate, control. And when one of our brightest minds got too close to something that threatened your monopoly, you had her killed. She stood, her movements casual but carrying the weight of absolute authority. So here's what's going to happen. Your species are being relocated to designated territories where you'll be free to develop your own societies without the ability to influence anyone else. Your trade networks are being dissolved and redistributed to the civilizations you've been exploiting. Your military assets are being decommissioned by human engineering teams who have some very interesting ideas about repurposing weapons of oppression. The Zephyrian war chief Kexixandra, whose exoskeleton was designed to deflect energy weapons but apparently offered no protection against existential dread, found her voice. You cannot simply reorganize galactic civilization. The logistics alone are being handled by the 847 species your council has been oppressing for the last 4 millennia, Tanaka replied. Turns out, when you stop actively sabotaging entire civilizations, they're quite capable of managing their own affairs. Who knew? She moved toward the chamber's exit, pausing only to deliver her final observation. The galaxy is going to be a very different place without the Council's guiding hand. Trade will be based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation. Technology will be shared rather than hoarded. Conflicts will be resolved through negotiation rather than subjugation. It's going to be messier, louder and far more chaotic than your perfectly ordered hierarchy. Her smile carried the satisfaction of someone who had just solved a problem that had been bothering them for years. But it will also be free. And freedom, as you're about to discover, is something humans are willing to kill for. 6 months later, the galaxy had indeed become a very different place. The former council territories were now managed by a loose confederation of species that had spent centuries dreaming of self-determination. Trade routes that had been restricted to council-approved vessels now hummed with traffic from dozens of previously marginalized civilizations. Research stations that had been limited to safe, profitable studies were now pursuing projects that pushed the boundaries of known science. The Vorthak, stripped of their technological superiority and forced to survive on mathematical theory alone, discovered that pure intellect without practical application was significantly less impressive than they'd believed. The Zephyrians, denied their military dominance and required to actually negotiate rather than conquer, found that their rigid hierarchy adapted poorly to cooperative decision-making. The Quelith, cut off from their exploitation networks and forced into legitimate commerce, learned that honest trade was considerably more difficult than manipulative deal-making. All 3 species survived, adapted, and eventually found new purposes in a galaxy that no longer feared them. Some even thrived once they stopped spending all their energy on maintaining an empire built on suffering. Humanity meanwhile settled into their new role as the galaxy's reluctant peacekeepers with the weary competence of people who had never wanted the job but weren't about to let anyone else screw it up. Human diplomatic stations appeared throughout former council space, staffed by individuals who combined bureaucratic efficiency with the kind of casual competence that made entire star systems think twice about starting conflicts. The Human Liberation Fleet became the human security force, maintaining a presence that was simultaneously reassuring to law-abiding civilizations and terrifying to anyone considering a return to the bad old days of galactic oppression. And in research stations throughout human space, scientists worked on projects that pushed the boundaries of quantum physics, gravitational manipulation, and faster-than-light travel. They named their most ambitious research facility the Mirachen Memorial Laboratory, where some of the galaxy's brightest minds continued the work that had cost one young human her life. The galaxy learned eventually that humans were indeed capable of remarkable things when properly motivated. They could be generous allies, innovative partners, and reliable protectors. They could also be absolutely ruthless when someone threatened their people, and they had very long memories when it came to injustice. But perhaps the most important lesson was this: when choosing between the easy path of accepting the status quo and the hard path of fighting for something better, humans would invariably choose the option that involved more work and greater risk simply because it was right. The Eternal Supremacy Council had ruled the galaxy for 3,847 years, 4 months and 12 days. They'd believed their system was perfect, their power absolute, their dominance eternal. It turned out that eternity had some scheduling conflicts, all because they killed one human girl who asked too many questions and refused to know her place. The galaxy, as it happened, was a much better place without people who thought anyone needed to know their place at all.